Today on In Her Words, we're sitting down with actor-director Amy Redford. Amy's newest project, What Comes Around, will be in theaters this week. It's a psychological thriller that may hit a little close to home in our world of ties to technology. Amy shares with us how this project came to be and how she really balances her creativity, her businesses, and being a mom of 3 daughters. We loved getting to know her, and we know you will too. Enjoy. So, Amy, thank you so much for being here today. We're so excited to have you on In Her Words, and
Oh,
it's so
thank
nice
you.
to meet you and your projects. I had so much fun digging in yesterday and reading about your history and your projects, and we will get to what comes around in a minute because it scared the crap out of me. I have a daughter, a teenage daughter, and Renee has a
Yeah,
one that's a tween, and I was like, okay, really, with that trailer?
yeah, and I've got both, so there you have it.
Yeah, that was one of those that kind of like, oh, it was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then I had a pit in my stomach after I after I watched it of them and their phones and their online presence. So,
Yeah.
but
Well,
let's
thank you
before
for
we get
saying
to
that.
that, let's we'd love to hear a little bit of your history. Well, not a little bit. We'd love to hear your story. Your acting, your directing, you're in front of the camera, you're behind the camera. Just really, besides your amazing creative Hollywood family, how you really found your way into this industry and found your way into wanting to be a creative.
Yeah, I mean, I had the good fortune of being educated in the world of the Sundance Labs, and a lot of the stories that my dad endeavored to do, and my whole family are creatives. From my sister being a painter and my late brother being a filmmaker, and and I think that one of the things that drew me to it was understanding that storytelling is really the portal to empathy. And in my desire to understand as much as I can about the human condition and the condition of our world, figuring out a relationship to storytelling that would be sustainable for myself in some way or another, and maybe evolving and changing, and just became really important to me. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. I didn't know if I was going to be a photographer, if I was a journalist, if I studied directing when I was in high school, and then photography, and I kind of got pulled into acting and did classical acting, and but I knew that I loved doing it, and I also really respect and admire the people that do it with me, and especially in this team sport that is known as filmmaking. And I think my deepest desire is that continues to evolve. I do love acting, but I knew that my peripheral vision was broader, I guess, and that sometimes that's a difficult thing as an actor to sustain that when you're kind of thinking about the 360 of the world that you're diving into. And I sort of thought that maybe I was starting to become kind of a pain in the ass as an actor, and that wasn't going to be something that I should keep up. So, that's kind of my background, I guess.
When did you make the decision, or what was that moment where you wanted to switch from being an actor? Like, when did you realize that wasn't going to be sustainable? When did you pivot more towards producing and directing?
I had the experience of going out to seeing plays and movies with my actor friends, and all they were saying was, "Oh, why is she playing that part? I could play that part. Why is he playing that part? I could play that part." And I found myself often going, "Oh, I could fix that, right? She's almost there, and maybe with a little this or a little of that." And the idea of fixing it started becoming more interesting to me than the idea of just doing it. And then a lot of my friends and colleagues would invite me to come see their films, or read their scripts, or come see their plays, and talk to them about what I saw. And I really enjoyed that experience. And I was working on the film The Guitar, and I thought that perhaps I was going to act in it, and then I kept firing myself in the part in my head and hiring other actors. So I thought, well, I think it's probably time to make that switch. And then, you know, managing life and managing children and knowing that, yeah, these are all my truths as a human being, you know, brought me into producing, which I'm incredibly grateful for a lot of reasons because of how critical the role is of the creative producer. I think that I understand better what that means and how much we really do have to hold that up as an important and celebrated part of our industry. And so I did that, and you know, I tried the executive hat on for a minute, which was an ill-fitting hat. It was sort of like Bartholomew and the 10,000 hats. One kept reoccurring on my head, but you know, then just sort of realized that I wanted to come back full circle, and my kids were into it. You know, they know that I love it, and I think they're, you know, steady on their feet. Um, Knock wood. Then it made it more feasible for me to start directing again.
Do you find that some of the experience that you had as an actress that informs how you direct or how you look at different, you know, your perspective of being going from in front to behind in terms of how you guide your teams?
I love actors, and I feel incredibly grateful for what they are willing to contribute and offer of themselves. And I know that there is benefit to that, and I also know that there is a cost. And so the more you can work with an actor with respect and efficiency, the more sustainable their work is, and the more they're able to bring their lived experience to the table. I know what it's like to be given a piece of direction that is really hard to translate, and try to do it. And so I endeavor to try to be as accessible as possible, but also give actors the dignity of their job, you know,
Yeah.
and to be able to cast for the parts, and not just for the names. So I think that has definitely fed into that part of it. You know, I like to get up, you know, close to them and talk to them. I believe in the textures that you don't necessarily see on screen, but really inform. So whether it's their history, the history of their relationships, whether it's the music they listen to, or what they secretly carry in their pockets, you know, these are all things that I think really help actors have something to turn to in a spontaneous moment. And that's where the fun is. You know, it's hard to be an actor, and many times, a lot of times, a lot of rejection. It's a lot of, you know, instability, which we obviously are familiar with at this moment. And so giving them the ability to really play when they can, it feels good to me.
Tell us a little bit. What does your team look like as you've kind of gone from in front of and behind and producing, like you said, executive? Has your team stayed the same? Who do you surround yourself with
You
now?
know, I mean, these projects that do tend to like call out for what they need to a certain extent. I mean, really, right now, my home team is my kids, and you know, and I do have people that are helping me. I have a wonderful assistant who's unfortunately flying the coop because she's way too smart for me, but you know, having a producer like Eden Wormfeld who, you know, can really help me guide and you know, keep away the things that I don't need to know about. But you know, the my one of my producers, Geraldine Dreyfus, is a, you know, producer that many people know, and she's you know, widely respected, and she takes no duff. I tell her to her face she's my biggest inspiration and cautionary tale all at the same time. But you know, I just signed with an agency that I really enjoyed working with. They're smart, and they're called Verve, and they really understand materials. So a lot of it has changed with what my priorities are as a human being. It's changed with what I want to spend my energy doing and not doing. And I really, it's kind of a cliche, but you know, I do have a bit of a no a-hole policy, and I try to hold myself to that standard as well. So that really dictates the team. You know, I think landscape of abundance is created with a inclusiveness and compassion for the work. And so those are the things that the team around me needs to buy into. And if they don't, that's okay. I'm just not their gal.
Something I found interesting, and it was, reading about, your, and it came up, I think, because there's been a big trend, especially after COVID, where a lot of industry people aren't living in LA and New York, and your dad probably kind of spearheaded this back in the day. But how do you find, with you said like your sister's a painter, and all the creatives and your creativity being, in Utah, in Colorado, a lot of your family there, being in and out of New York and LA, do you find that the creative community is sort of it's all over now, and you find people everywhere? How has that helped or hurt your creativity and your business, not being have to be in LA 24/7?
Yeah, I mean, it has always been all over. Whether or not they got the sort of visibility was another conversation. The film community in Utah is deep and long, and there's an incredible amount of talent that is there. I think for me, living in a blue city in a red state is incredibly healthy because you don't have the option to look away from other points of view and other perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's critical to being able to have conversations that are nuanced and more rich than binary. And so I think that a lot of really interesting creativity comes out of that environment. The collision of the natural world implicates you in ways that nothing else does. And that's hugely important to me. Knowing that my kids are growing up in a way that has a kind of expansiveness. I love what I do, and I love, the journey of it all. But there's also a lot of people out there doing a lot of important other jobs besides the ones that I do. So it's holding all of that as valued, whether you're a filmmaker or you're my friend Missy running a coffee franchise, or these are important things to show that should be upheld in society. And it's hard to do that when you're in a one industry town. It can be, you really have to work at it, and I don't have that much bandwidth.
Amy, how when you look back on guitar, when you're looking at what comes around, how do you kind of find your projects? Like, what really interests you, and how has your taste evolved?
This project was sent to me by a friend who wrote a play and wanted my feedback. And Scott and I have been trying to work together for many, many years. We were working on a different project that kind of fell apart, and then realized that that was the project that was supposed to happen after this one. Thematically, it's absolutely the time for it. And so um, I said, Scott, this is a great play. I think it's also a film that we could shoot, during COVID. So he endeavored to write the adaptation, and we just sort of worked away at it. I felt like it had themes that I wanted to dive into, and it scared me a little bit. So I thought that's probably a good sign. But he is a crafts person. He really knows his craft, and so that means a lot to me. I think you have to sort of ask yourself, why me? Why now? Why am I the person to tell this story? Why are we doing this story now?
Yeah.
The same thing was true for me with the guitar. It was sent to me as potentially as an actress. And then I was like, well, I really want to explore some of these ideas in a more expansive way. And now some of the things that I'm thinking about diving into are things that I feel like my lived experience has something to offer to. If I could read a wonderful project, or but I don't know what it is that I'm actually going to be additive on. So I try to do that because as you know, there is a lot going into doing these things and being a mom. I have to be able to look my kids in the eye and say, this is worth it, and I need to do this, and there's a reason why I feel like this needs to go out in the world. So It's a very long-winded answer to your question,
No,
but
no, absolutely, absolutely. It's
That's interesting.
it's. I think you answered that beautifully.
Cool.
and then I'm working on a podcast called Scrappy Broads, which has been, really fun and amazing, and a bunch of other stuff. I'm producing a couple of documentaries.
I wanted to ask you about the documentaries versus the narratives. How that's not a line a lot of people cross. And how are you handling that? How is there really a different mindset to to handling that? And do you go back and forth, or do you feel like you have to kind of put the narratives on the side and get into doc world and vice versa?
I think it really informs each other. I've stolen moments for actors from documentaries when I really want to talk about telling the truth between two human beings. It's better to obviously be in a situation. Like I just taught a workshop at University of Utah, and I said, I don't want to see your interpretation of Brad Pitt's interpretation of a human being. I want to, your job is to reflect back to the world what you see. And so I don't know that there's been enough demand on curiosity. So my hope is to, continue to stimulate that as much as possible. But I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's just yeah, that's it's so interesting to find someone in even the other areas like directing and producing and kind of going back and forth and with the documentaries and the narrative, just being able to have
We're
both
all
of
in the
those
similar
mindsets.
business, right? I mean, it is, we're sort of in the business of trying to get down to the bottom of things.
Right, the
And
story, like
whatever
you
that
said,
vehicle
empathy.
is, you know, that's the demand. The documentary I'm working on and producing, and it's about LGBTQ plus youth in Utah who are walking the tension between their identity and the church. And we're embedded with these kids, and Stephen Franzen, who's the director, is just a really ethical filmmaker. Again, it's sort of like, why me? Why am I additive? Why should I be a part of it? I like to get in the trenches. I don't really get involved with stuff that I can't kind of dig into. So I helped produce a series on the Lincoln Project
Hmm.
that was documentary, and that was a similar call, which was we should probably be having these conversations. So
I think documentaries are just they're having such a moment now of being more, and just like everything, there's some that are great and some that are schlocky, but I think the great ones are outweighing, and the creatives and the filmmakers and the people behind them, of, like you said, really ethically getting those stories out there. I listen to a billion podcasts, and I can't tell you how many, whether it's a political podcast or a movie podcast or something else, they'll reference a documentary and commenting on how it was beautifully done or how much they learned from something. And so I do think, and I've always loved documentaries. When Renee and I first started working together, one of the things we worked on at ArcLight in LA was a documentary film festival, and working with IDA and bringing especially female documentarians and trying to get more exposure for those projects. And I love that the documentary moment seems to be more than a moment. It's continuing to be there.
Movement.
yeah, I think that the way in which we've been able to explore landscapes that are otherwise inaccessible is a really healthy thing for all of us. Right now, I am concerned because these documentaries are really important, and yet they're getting kind of abandoned from a sales perspective.
Mm.
So I think figuring out a different way for us to continue to offer these movies to the general public, because they love them and they want them, but it's hard to quantify from a financial perspective. But agreed. I mean, for me, it's incredibly important to not only my work but the way in which I I'm tackling subjects. So my hope is that you are correct and they continue to have this moment. My fear is that we need to figure out a way to continue to provide maybe a more of a direct to consumer environment so that people can have access to these and if they're not making it through the narrow portal of our sort of sales and distribution um, mechanism.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. It is difficult, and I think IDA was doing a great job of getting things out there, and um, yeah, it's hard through the channels and through the normal sales channel for theatrical, and I think even streamers have helped bring that accessibility for some of these documentaries and getting at least, again, I know that's not, people are still paying for that and they're still having to choose that, but there's just seems to be a little more accessible when if they're on a lot of different channels.
Yeah.
What's your feeling? I know your new project and the guitar, those were um, theatrical. Are you when you look at a project, do you know where it's going to end up, or do you have an idea of it's this is okay for streaming, or this actually should be a series, or this is definitely a 2 hour theatrical release? How do you kind of go into thinking of where it's going to how it's going to be presented to the public?
Yeah, I mean, I don't identify as a writer, so I am the beneficiary of people that are much smarter than me to figure a lot of that stuff out when it
Mhm.
comes to the format and the mechanism. But I think when you're looking at something, you're trying to just be honor the story. And as you begin to see those sort of elements come together, it starts to reveal itself to a certain extent. With what comes around, Scott and I were like, we're going to make a movie by this date for however much money we have, and that might mean finger puppets and iPhones or proper actors and an actual set. But we just approached it with a certain amount of defiance, and that seemed to have some gravitational pull, so we didn't know. We knew that we wanted to tell the story, we wanted to work together, and then the rest of it sort of was revealed. And IFC, who is a champion of films like this, who's really critical to our environment, jumped in and helped make that happen. Without that part of it, it's almost impossible. So I think it's important to also hold up these parts of our industry where, we might be taking them for granted, and yet when they go away, we go, wait, where are all those great movies? Or where are the movies that, might be a counterbalance to some of the big marquee films. So I really don't know. I mean, in terms of things like series, that is a writing part of it, to say it can how deep do we want to get in the weeds? How many of these fibers can we pull apart? Series are wonderful because you can really pull apart all the fibers and go a little deeper. Sometimes you want more efficiency, so I think it does sort of call out.
Amy, one of the things that our audience really focuses on is, and what we try to bring to them is just, some of the pivots and some of the fears. And, when you look back on your career, what were the moments that, we've had people talk about moments that they were like, I walked into the room and I was just like, I couldn't even breathe. I was so nervous. It's like when you look back on, all of your different experiences, you wear three different hats. What are the moments that stand out in your mind that you kind of stepped back and grounded yourself, or you had to pivot, or that you still get nervous about?
I mean, this morning, I mean, this is an ongoing sort of evolution. I Today I'm reminded of a moment when I was going to pitch, and my kids were little. My oldest daughter was maybe 6, and I went upstairs and I put on an outfit, and I was like, "This is the outfit. It's going to say what I wanted to say." And she looked at me. She was like, "What are you wearing?" And I was like, "What do you mean, what am I wearing?" And she's like, I said, well, I just, I want to show them that I'm strong, right? And she said, but mom, you are strong. And she
Oh,
said,
that's
you're also feminine, and however it is that you can hold all of those truths at once and walk into a room is where I think you're going to be the more successful. And I was like, okay, kid, how are you doing? But I do think that I would jettison parts of myself that I thought were inconvenient. Things that might look at contradictions. My podcast is called Scrappy Broads because it was inspired by Madeleine Albright, who was saving the free world and also a saucy flirt and a family woman and had a great shoe collection and incredibly intellectual. And I was like, that is interesting to me. And so as I've grown, I think allowing for those things to be in the room with me, not feeling like I have to, sort of cut off parts of myself that maybe seem like they're contradictory. Um, I think also when I look back, even recently and say, oh, I thought I could overcome people whose values didn't align with me because I was just going to surround everybody with good people. I don't find that to be true anymore. I don't have the bandwidth to work with people whose values don't align. And I'm not saying we have to have the same perspective, but things like respect and things like transparency and these are things I just can't live without. And it took me a while to really acknowledge that. So thinking that I had to always do everything, being a mother, what I needed to do on behalf of my family, that's not a big statement for all women. I could never represent all women. I barely represent myself. So it was what my family dictated. That's not saying that that's what everybody's family should dictate. I think being a little more forgiving in this realm has been a part of my evolution. Forgiving to myself, not holding back on things that I was clear on, and trusting my instincts. The times that I've gone the worst is when I'm like, la 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 la, not listening to that. So now I try to just at least stop and say, what is that? And maybe I do need to question it, but maybe don't plow ahead without acknowledging that that's what's happening inside of my body. I could go on and on. It's been a
No, that's
journey.
really it's really interesting, and I feel like we hear that, and you called it, I'm no assholes, or would know, I feel like we hear that in such a stronger way from women, and women are willing to hold that line of, I don't want to be around people that aren't, like you said, it's not for different perspectives, it's not the diversity and the inclusivity, but it's the, I want the same values, and I want the same, my husband who runs a successful business, and there's a couple people that, historically I have colleagues that I've known forever, and I'm like, how can you be around that guy? He's just and there he's so like, oh, I just know how he is, and I just know. And and I always say the pitch perfect line is like, cut off. Like, you're not like, I don't know, I think women just are like, I'm not gonna put up with that.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
men are kind of like, oh, I just know how he is, so you
yeah.
go in knowing how he is. I'm like, no, I don't want that in my life.
no.
Well, I think it's also strategy. I mean, I think it's efficiency.
Yeah,
It's not just emotion, it's pragmatism.
Right.
If you're having to navigate all of that noise and you're having to counterbalance and you're having to protect that person and you're having to talk them off a cliff and just treat them like, they're two and a half, you're not doing the work.
right.
And the other people that really want to bring their best to the table are also not doing the work. They're hiding in the corners or they're looking away, and that's inefficient.
Hmm.
So I feel like it's really a selfish part of me that is thinking this way now. I want to get to the work
Right,
and
right.
not the mess,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to waste any time or waste any
Right.
energy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's so it's interesting that we hear that so much more from women.
Yeah, I think we've had to deal with a lot of it. I mean, I'm very grateful that all of the things, all of the strides that have been made on behalf of what it is to be a woman in our industry history. It was a very different landscape when I started out. And I think that the culture that has been demanded is really one that is allowing for really good work to happen. And I know that a lot, and I'd say that on behalf of men as well.
Hmm.
You know, this isn't just a female kind of desire. You know, I think it's really about we're living in complicated times. There's a lot of mental health issues. Like, we need to figure out how to allow people to show up in their workplace and feel safe, whether you're a man or a woman or in between. You know, I mean, this is really about how can we really thrive. Um, and so those are the things that I think create, you know, successful conditions. As much as I enjoy them more, I just, you know, if you're not going to do it for the right reasons, at least do it for the smart reasons.
Right, right.
Yeah. When you walk on set, when you walk onto your sets, it's, how do you approach your teams, in terms of making sure it's a safe and, welcoming, warm, and, inclusive set? And I know that's important to you.
It is, you know, and I do endeavor to do it as much as possible. It doesn't always work. I like to try to involve everybody in the storytelling. So, you know, as much as possible to say, here's the story we're telling today. And so it's not just the actors and the DP and your producer that's involved. It's, you know, maybe the person that's serving your lunch, you know, has a grandmother that went through something similar, and then they become implicated in the storytelling. I find that really exciting, and sometimes it can really save your butt. Um, I do think that inclusivity and diversity makes for better storytelling. And that's not just in front of the camera. There's incredible talent that's out there that's underused. A lot of people default to what they know or what they've worked with before. And I think, you know, the more that you can have different lenses, different ideas, different, you know, frame of reference on your stories, the better that they are. So again, it's strategy.
Yeah.
And I also am sensitive. You know, I take a lot of it on. I ingest it a lot. I want to live a long time, so I'd rather be in an environment where I have a better chance of letting that happen.
So let's talk a little bit about this picture that is coming out. So, like I said at the beginning, the trailer is so like not okay for a mom of teenage girls. It was a play, and you said so. What attracted you? So that you knew it was a great play, and that attracted you to want to bring it in a different forum. But this cast, I mean, just so amazing, and the story. And so, tell us a little bit about it. We're excited for it to be in theaters next Friday. You said IFC, which I again worked with IFC for years and years. I mean, nobody better in championing the specialty film, and championing, really or unique stories being out there. So the picture's in such great hands with them.
Yes, it is. Thank you for saying that. And they actually helped us find our title, so I'm
Oh,
grateful to that as well. You know, this story was something that I felt like in a time where it's really easy for us to demonize each other. It's easy to look at somebody's behavior and say, you know, oh, well, they're just broken. And yet we all are fallible. And I think, you know, when we look at what we have handed our children in terms of their existence and their way of communicating and their way of expressing themselves, and then we judge them for it, you know, instead of maybe diving into, well, what is this like for you? You know, maybe it's a time to be a little more inquisitive about what's going on. And I know that I failed in my own way to do that all the time, and I'm endeavoring to be better about it. I think, you know, being able to investigate the ideas of downstream effects of gaslighting, and what happens, and you can't necessarily see the consequences of not owning your shit, and telling the truth. And you know, now that I'm a parent, the genre part of the movie was important to me because, you know, the horror part is the idea that something that I do could somehow fall out on the shoulders of my children, you know, and that could continue when I had a chance to let that not happen. That's hell. And so I thought, the way that Scott had constructed it was kept you in the present, keeps you in the present. My cast, Summer Phoenix was the first one to jump on board, and beyond grateful to her for jumping in. She and I have shared some lived experience, and so that created its own kind of momentum. And then the rest of my cast were just amazing. They were all very protective of their characters. They came ready to work, and with all really insightful things to add, and a sense of play, which is important, because then it takes on a life of its own. So yeah, I really hope it does stimulate conversation. I do hope that, it does create an opportunity for parents to go see these things with their children. I've got a 14-year-old and 12-year-old twins, so all girls, and I'm in it every day, imperfectly. I'm in it, but and we don't necessarily allow for ourselves to acknowledge to our children the things that we do wrong, and they see it, they see through it. And when you try to pretend that you're perfect, then you kind of lose your credibility. So, I guess I'm personally wrestling with some of these things, and thought maybe some other people were as well.
No, I think it's going to reach a lot of people, and I felt like the like technology is it's another whether it's you could call it another family member, another person in our lives, another a a player in this connecting of how do we protect our children, how do we embolden them to go out into the world. And this technology piece is something that, even though it's been around, I mean, it's still new to all of us as parents. That you can teach your kids how you shake hands and how you speak to someone and how you act at school, and then there's this whole other world of that we don't know how to teach them everything.
And it's also just exposure. We don't know how to really, how do you protect them in the 25 different social medias that pop up every day, or different platforms that are popping up for them? How do you protect your kids from that?
Yeah, the only thing that I can say, I come at this being a little bit of a Luddite myself, and so I had to realize that I was illiterate, and that I was asking them to read, and I was illiterate, and I just thought, okay, I got to understand a little bit more of this, and some of it I get, I understand,
Yeah.
I see some of the things that come out of it, and I understand that it's been a great democratization of a lot of ideas. If you live in far-flung places, you get access to thoughts and perspectives that might be really affirming and life-saving, as
Yeah.
well as judgmental and and hard. So, I mean, our ways of communicating. I mean, where are we authentic and where are we performative? And this is part of human nature that's pretty old. And I think we're just continuing to evolve it and understand it. I know I am, as a person, probably will be a lifelong pursuit.
No, I think we all are. Did you? I thought about Summer and her family and your family and kind of coming together as two Hollywood royal families. Is Did you know her before? Did you know any of the cast before? Had you worked with anyone before?
No, I didn't, and I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful to my, one of the producers, Jeff Hayes, who allowed me to cast for the roles and didn't hold me to a financial model that was going to undermine what I do best. And so that was important, and being able to read actors and have them read with each other, and Summer coming to the table knowing that she had also taken somewhat of a break, and she's been in the business of raising some kids and living life, and falling down and getting back up again, just like I was. That felt very accessible to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew Bobby Bukowski, who is my director of photography, who was very close with her, and he suggested her for the part. And so it started like sort of a bit of a family connection. It was like somebody who is dear to him, and he's very dear to me, and that all felt good. And then the rest I managed to acquire. I mean, Raina, who plays Britt in the movie, is actually Grace's best friend.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So, and that made sense. And I didn't do anybody any favors except me because she's an amazing actress and they already had a relationship. So, um, you know, there's a lot of people that earn their part,
Mhm.
and that makes it so that everybody can come to the table knowing why they're there, which is important.
No, yeah, it's an amazing cast. So, tell us, and I know this informs how you come to your own projects, but what projects do you love? What are you reading or watching or listening to with your girls, or for business, or what else are you enjoying out there that kind of for that takes you out of the industry or that informs your own projects?
Well, all of it. I mean, it's going in and out. I think is a healthy process. These projects. I'm working on one about the slinky and one about the invention of the slinky. Another one is an adaptation of a Don DeLillo book. As I told you, working on podcasts and working on historical fiction. And they all kind of weirdly inform each other, so often what I consume is in relation to what I'm trying to create. And that takes me on an interesting investigative journey, which I really love. It's a great way to acquire knowledge with that kind of purpose. But I also have a daughter that's about to start ninth grade, and so I'm gonna have to spend a fair amount of time biting my nails. Um,
What do you guys escape with out of work and out of home? Do you guys have guilty pleasures you watch or listen to with your girls?
well, I don't know how guilty it is. I think the jury's out on this one, but the we just saw the Barbie movie and loved it a lot and laughed a lot. When the guitar moment happened, I thought I was gonna not breathe. I mean, Guitar the Godfather. Oh my lord. Never have to go through that again. But I think we watch all kinds of stuff. I mean, we love watching RuPaul's Drag Race. It's one of my favorite things to watch with the girls, and we sort of go in and out. We just watched Blackberry, and as we're
Oh,
trying to
right.
connect
Yeah.
technology to them, and it was a little bit related to this film, and also
Yeah.
the movie that I'm working on about the invention of the Slinky, because the main character is a thing, but it's not really. So, but I think it's fun to just be, have escapist things that we
Mhm.
consume and things that are a little bit more meaningful. I just showed them The Eagle Huntress, which was a great documentary. But tomorrow maybe it's Love Island.
Nothing wrong with reality. I want to. Have you watched the Beanie? Has anybody watched the Beanie Bubble? I wanted to watch it this week so badly, but it's the story of the Beanie Babies with the
Oh,
Thai company, but it's Zach Galifianakis, Sarah Snook, and Elizabeth Banks, and it's on. I think it just came on Apple TV this week. It's a movie, not a series, but it looks. First of all, I mean, really, Zach Galifianakis, Sarah Snook, and the
oh my
cast is so
gosh.
great. But it was such a story and such a moment in time of this little company with their little stuffed animals that blew up. So I'm dying to watch it. I haven't heard anybody that's watched it this weekend. So
I will be so curious. I mean, that's right up
right,
the zone. I mean, Blackberry, I really liked.
yeah,
It was really
Yeah.
well done, and it was a great cast. And again, it wasn't necessarily a star-centered cast, which I
hmm
thought was really satisfying,
hmm
and about a thing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's really also just about that, the culture, all these things that matter. Why does something implode? And where, what is the cost of letting go of that true north? Um,
Right.
or holding on to it, even when everything else fails. So,
Yeah, they're such interesting stories, and especially when they're you can remember them, you've lived them, and been part of the BlackBerry culture or the Beanie Baby culture. Those make it even more fun.
It does, and I so appreciate being able to have such a wide spectrum of things to dive into. It's really, I mean, one of my kids is reading 1984 right now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is wow. But yeah, I think we're really served by a lot of the incredible content that's out there. We're just
Yeah.
gotta pray that we find a sustainable model for all.
Well, Amy, it was so fantastic to have you on today. We're so excited about your new project. We'll be
Thank you
promoting it
so much.
across all of our channels.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. It's a difficult time. It's a difficult time to be pushing something out, and
Yeah.
I really want all of the people involved to be acknowledged for their great work. So having moments like this to talk about it, I'm incredibly grateful.
Well, thank you for being here. We're excited about it. We will be there, even if I'm watching part of it through through
Good.
closed fingers.
Good. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womeninentertainment.com.